And little known fact, I've actually seen it with my own eyes, snow and everything. So I mean, I couldn't measure how much with my eye. I'm not Superman, right? All I know is it looked snowy and cold. Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to the weather. Being from England, I should know a thing or two about that, given as we are to moaning at the first sight of drizzle. But there's another form of precipitation in England, one whose arrival is more of an event than a recurrence, and that is snow. As a child, I did build the occasional snowman, sledge my way down hills and take the snowballs to the face. But these were rare instances. In England, when the snow does come, the soggy earth is covered in little more than a thin white carpet, though the opposite is usually true of actual white carpets. And the notion of, say, a white Christmas is enveloped more in hope than inevitability. Indeed, the entire UK hasn't seen one since about 2010, which is really incredible given that the Met Office defines a white Christmas, and I'm not kidding, as the observance of a single snowflake anywhere in the UK on December 25th. But despite all this, my Anglo-centric brain couldn't quite comprehend that America had it so much worse, or better, depending on your relationship with snow. While studying abroad in England, my ex, who was a native of Maine, assured me that her home state was so inundated with snow, it made English winters look like a fortnight in Florida. This simply didn't jive with my firmly established view that America was this sunny paradise of beaches and palm trees, and if anyone knew this, it was me because, well, I'd spent a fortnight in Florida. But a couple of years down the road, I met my, now wife, a native of Indiana. She was equally dismissive of England's attempts at winter, and once again, as with my ex, I just didn't believe her. Clearly, I had a thing for the American woman who likes to embellish her home state's precipitation levels demographic. We've all done it. The thing is, they weren't lying. America, particularly in the north, gets way more snow than England, something I found to my chagrin after moving here in 2008. And while several states actually boast more inches per year than my homeland, there are some in particular that absolutely bury the rest. Using data collected by the NOAA National Climatic Data Center between 1981 and 2010, here are 7 states with way more snow than England. Okay, so I lied, kind of. It's actually surprisingly difficult, in fact, to calculate the average snow accumulation for an entire state. And that's partly because the study that I just mentioned catalogues specific places within states rather than the states themselves. But from that data, we can get a pretty good indication of just how badly some states suffer from winter dandruff. Like Wyoming, home of Yellowstone, magnificent scenery, and just 2 sets of escalators. That's amazing! Wyoming, and this might account for why it also has fewer people than cows, gets way more snow than England, or even Scotland, where the Cairngorms gets 126 inches a year. That's the UK's highest. You see, things are very, shall we say, flaky in northwest Wyoming, places like Yellowstone Lake, Moran, Moose, place, that's an actual place name. All of these get over 150 inches of snow, and in parts of our next entry, it's even worse. 2 things come to mind when I think of Colorado, right? Skiing, and that time that Jack Nicholson sort of overdid it on the sugar. And believe me, none of these scenarios would be possible without torrents of snow. Nicholson plays Jack Torrance in The Shining, that's why that's funny. Anyway, it should probably come as no surprise that Colorado's snowiest places, like Aspen, Vail, and Crested Butte, that isn't real,
Crested Butte.
Crested Butte. Okay, well, I'm deeply relieved for the people of that town. Anyway, it should come as no surprise that all of those places have ski resorts. A good thing too, because each of them averages annual snowfall close to 200 inches. That's about 3 Jack Nicholsons. And as it happens, the man who wrote The Shining himself knows a thing or two about snow. He actually wrote the book while living in Boulder, and outside of that, Stephen King was and is a native of our next entry. See, my ex wasn't lying. Pound for pound, Maine is one of the snowiest states in the US, and don't take my word for it, just watch the documentary Misery. Such a harrowing fly on the wall about this writer who's tied up and tortured, and yet all I could think about was the snowy village. Is it? It's fiction. No way! Why didn't you tell me this before? That would have been the perfect transition. We'd have just gone in with that. I'd have led with Stephen King's Misery. So just watch Stephen King's Misery, or read it. It was probably a book first, right? The point is, you know, for every moose, for every crested butte, the previous two states also have places where you only get under 30 inches. It's diverse, but looking at the data, the thing that stands out to me about Maine is that nowhere in the state averages lower than 45. For perspective, English cities range from about 2 inches to 35, so the state of Maine is one giant snow globe during winter. Actually, now that I think about it, the same is absolutely true of just the Northeast in general. That's right, so trivia, the state of Maine is actually the only state in the Union that is bordered by just one other state, and that state happens to be New Hampshire. And so because of that, you can quite imagine that New Hampshire's weather systems, as well as its English ancestry, that's a nod back to a previous video, is pretty similar to Maine's, and so it is true. Just like with Maine, it doesn't have really any cities that average under 45 inches. And so once again, you know, the entire state, a small state, we should reiterate, I'm a poet and I didn't know it, is one big, huge carpet of white in winter. And when I say carpet, I mean a really thick carpet to where you'd break your ankles, it'd be that thick, and that's not good. Now, aside from this consistency across the entire state, you also have this peak. It's a mountain. It's called Mount Washington. And just as with other high elevation places in the United States, this is where even more snow accumulates. So there you have an average of 281.2 inches a year. That's quite precise. And little known fact, I've actually seen it with my own eyes, snow and everything. So I mean, I couldn't measure how much with my eye. I'm not Superman, right? All I know is it looked snowy and cold. Much like our next entry. Now, Alaska's sort of weird because I always do picture it as snowy and cold, and sure enough, of course, in the winter, it is. But unlike the New England states, it very much varies across the state. And of course, it makes sense. This is a very big state. And there are certainly places within Alaska that get actually considerably less snow than the likes of Maine and New Hampshire. But its overall average is brought up by frankly absurd levels of snow in isolated pockets of Alaska. Take, for example, the city of Valdez, right? Valdez is purported to be the snowiest city in the entire United States because it draws annually, on average, a quite unfathomable... If you move in there and you're a fan of cricket, you won't, of course, you know, wintertime, that's true of every state on this list, including our penultimate entry. There you have it, we're back to New England, and much like the other northeastern states on this list, and just in general, Vermont doesn't have kind of a mammoth city like Valdez. That was weird. But it does have consistently cities on this list that average over 80 inches of snow. That's what makes it one of the snowiest states in the entire Union. And don't be fooled, you know, if you're thinking of moving to the Green Mountain State and you think, well, I'll just move to one of the sort of famous cities like Montpelier or, you know, Burlington. No, it happens there too. In fact, they average about 90 inches of snow a year. So whichever way you do it, you've got to like snow, otherwise, or Ben and Jerry's. But that doesn't go down well in the winter, unless you're me and I'm just addicted. And kind of like with New Hampshire, not only do you have those sort of consistent averages throughout the year, in fact, higher consistent averages than you saw in New Hampshire, but you also have the mountain effect once again. That's right, Mount Mansfield averages about 3.5 Jack Nicholsons. That's not really that far away from being taller than the tallest building in the entire state of Vermont, which happens to be this. Not kidding, that is genuine, that's a fact. It's weird to think that when I see the Willis Tower every morning. And in fact, now that we're on the subject, that brings us on to the state with the tallest building in America. But funnily enough, New York City and just sort of downstate New York in general doesn't actually get snow on the level that you see in the rest of the northeast of the United States that we touched on here in this very video. The heavy load is actually carried by upstate New York. It gets a ton of snow, and it's all down to lake effect weather. So the likes of Buffalo and Rochester, they get nearly 100 inches of snow. That is mental, but it's not as mental as the city of Syracuse, which gets 123.8 inches a year on average. That's mental. It's also, for that reason, the snowiest city in the lower 48 of the United States. And I know what you're thinking, how dare you, sir, accuse Syracuse of being the worst? You didn't think that. I just like wordplay. Those were 7 states that get way more snow than England. Let me know in the comments below if you live in one of those states or any state that gets way more snow than England. There are plenty of them. As ever, I've got to say it, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. Right now, I want to do a big shout out to all my patrons without whom none of this would be possible. From the writing to the research to the cricket tour of Valdez. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so at patreon.com/LostInThePond. patreon.com/lostinthepond. And of course, what that gets you is access to my secret live stream, and anybody that pledges $5 or more a month will get access to not only that, but my secret podcast and more. Until next time, do wrap up warm, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost in the Pond. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and if you would like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.